Hi, Lisa.
There.
Good. Glad you're here. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Thanks to all who are here. I'm excited to be with you and have this hour to reflect on ritual. So it was a joy to listen into the last part of the previous presentation and get a sense also from the lists of other workshops and webinars going on, what a rich and really astonishing festival and immersion this is. So let's see, will share my screen. And that's visible.
Oh, Lisa, just wait. Okay. Now you're on. Now the half hour
Okay.
started. So.
Oh, okay. So do you need me to start over?
No, go right ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Lisa Dahill. I teach at Hartford International University for Religion and Peace in Hartford, Connecticut, and am here excited to reflect with you on this question of rewilding ritual. What does that mean, and where does it go, and how can we connect to these questions? So I come to you from Tunxus land, part of the larger Algonquin people here in north central Connecticut, and am one who, as a white settler heritage, relatively newly arrived in this land. Actually, I personally am very newly arrived in this land just in the last 18 months, but for many years have honored and tried to learn as much as I can from the people who are indigenous to the places where I've lived, and am just at the beginning of that in this land. So I look forward to much more connections and conversations on ritual in years to come here. So my own background is out of the Christian tradition, and I've been working for a long time on this question I was a worship professor at a Christian seminary for 10 years in central Ohio, during which I had a big outdoor kind of conversion and began taking chapel outdoors and classes outdoors and everything else outdoors, and really marvelous creative work with students and others. And since then, I then went to teach in a different place. And now I'm in this context that was a seminary, is still a theological school, graduate theological school, but is interreligious. And my role here is to do that same thing of moving us outdoors, if you will. And so I'm continue to be passionate about this question of what is ritual, and how do we stretch our traditions for people who are coming out of a religious tradition, or sort of create ritual or find community in relation to the natural world in new ways, as we so urgently need today. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And the text on this slide, the Wild Seekers and Wild Churches logos, and as well as the crow and the mushrooms, come from the website of the Wild Church Network, which is an awesome community of network of communities all over North America, and a couple of international ones as well, who are asking this question of what happens when worship moves outdoors, many from Christian traditions, but also from interreligious and non-Christian traditions. So that's a little of the provenance of who I am and what has brought me to this topic and to this webinar. So I'm curious about what draws you here, and I wonder if I can, you know what? I don't know how to have on my slideshow. I wanted to have you put in the chat, but if I have you put it in the chat, I can't see it, I don't think. Have on the slideshow and be able to read the chat. So maybe I'll just ask the questions now, make a note, because later we'll have time for Q&A. So I'm curious about these questions. Where are you from? What are your hopes or your curiosities and questions for this webinar, and any background in ritual? And feel free to put that in the chat, just knowing that I won't see it till later, till I turn off the screen share.
Lisa, I will let you know if it goes into question and answer also. So I'll let you know what they are.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Paul. Because in thinking about this, it's a huge topic, right? Ritual is huge and encompassing, and people come with all different kinds of backgrounds and all different kinds of questions. So I'm going to start with slides that are just sort of orient to ritual generally, and then we'll have some solo writing time, and then we'll come into the Q&A, at which point, your answers to these questions may be relevant as you shape how you want to engage. So you may be wanting to explore questions like rewilding existing rituals, which is how I got into this, as I was saying, from things like I published a thing on the ritual of Christian baptism, and proposing the urgent necessity in a time of ecological crisis and eco-alienation among religious people. I was going to say especially among religious people, but I can't necessarily document that, but certainly among religious people, many of them, and how do traditional Christian rituals reinforce that separation, and church walls reinforce that separation, and the sacrament of Christian baptism being this indoor ritual for humans only, in water that's dead, that's chlorinated to kill anything that lives in it, in a room, is a far cry from the origins of the practice. So rewilding Christian baptism, meaning taking it back into the living waters. Jesus was baptized in the River Jordan, and early Christians for hundreds of years baptized in their local creeks and rivers. At the point when Christianity became the religion of the empire, it all moved indoors gradually, more and more and more. So there's a connection. And what happens when Christian ritual moves fully back out and requires us to pay attention to the health of the creeks and the rivers and the lakes and the oceans near us, if we're going to put babies and adults in them, and paying attention to who lives there and being part of the bigger spiritual communion, right? That being baptized into all of it. So what does it mean to rewild rituals is an important question, because we still have religious rituals, non-religious rituals, and how can they reconnect or newly connect with this larger natural world from which we're often so alienated? So that's one big question that you may be interested in. Another might be, I gotta re-click, creating new rituals. So, you may be interested in questions of ritual that aren't about adapting or stretching something you already know about, but about creating something new that you see the need for, or feel the need for, or that you're already doing. Or you may be coming with just curiosity about these questions about ritual in relation to the wild. So we'll have space to engage all three of these kind of levels. I'm going to start with the last one, these broader questions of ritual, and then we'll move into the others. So I asserted something about, mainstream, or if you will, or normative or dominant Christian practice, Christianity as the dominant religion in North America. But there are lots of other rituals too, right, that have no connection to the natural world or actively reinforce our alienation from it. And so I have images of lots of different kinds of rituals, including on the top left, this sort of sense of Christian ritual as opening up into some ethereal realm in people's imagination, or in kind of the practice that they experience. And the rest we get. So when COVID happened, I, along with many others, thought this might be our chance to sort of move outdoors. There was a moment in that first summer where there was a lot of movement outdoors, of ritual outdoors, worship in the park. I found these images, these are web images of people kind of moving outdoors, kind of still maybe doing, the bottom left, kind of still doing church in the same way. We're still going to have people in rows and microphones and speakers and all the way we're going to do it outdoors. So at least it's outdoors, at least we're kind of out. It's not fully how I'm going to be talking about ritual and rewilding ritual in actual connection and interconnection with everyone who lives there. It's still kind of a human ritual in the version, on the screen. But nevertheless, COVID, sort of, it felt like, all right, now we're moving out, and maybe there's an opening into going even further out. What has happened, again, at least in Christian circles, and what I hear, here at HIU from people in many traditions, is that hasn't happened. We're still indoors for our religious rituals and lots of other rituals. And in fact, now that a whole bunch of stuff went on to Zoom and live streaming during COVID, it's even more the case in some cases that we're even more cut off with screens than we were before. So the central image that I had on the previous screen as well, but here you can maybe see that this is actually an image of a family watching church on TV. So they're not just indoors in the sanctuary, but they're indoors in their house watching an indoor ritual on TV. And so the layers of indoorness and mediation have, in many cases, only increased as a result of this kind of movement online, which, of course, is fantastic. That's how this festival is happening, and it's how we're able to have this connection. And it's how many of our courses now here at HIU are taught, with people from all over the place able to participate and engage. So, this is not, I'm not saying this is all a bad thing, just that in terms of ritual connection to the natural world, it hasn't gone fully out the way I initially and many others hoped 3 years ago. So yeah, what is an alternative? How do we think about and start moving out? Is how we'll be sort of focusing this time together. So first, on this question of ritual, I have an initial presupposition. And I think this thing is in the way. So this is a quote referring to a theologian, a Christian theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who's an anti-Nazi theologian and ended up being killed by Hitler for his part in the conspiracy. But before he died, and this was in 1941 or so, in his Ethics, wrote about his insistence that understanding God in a way that is split from the world, creates an abstraction of both of those. So any sense, he asserts, of God split from world is by definition problematic. And he's writing as a Christian. So that's very interesting, because Christians have indeed split God from world very often. And he's asserting that this kind of image is a problem theologically. So instead, he actually says that we need to learn to experience again God and world as one reality, not two. I thought I had a slide on that, but I must have taken it out. So one reality, not two. God and world are one thing. What does that mean? So here's another perspective from someone who doesn't use God language. That was a Christian, trying to, and I'm actually writing a book on him right now, trying to propose a non-dualistic Christian spirituality using Bonhoeffer and many others. So David Abram is not Christian and isn't using the God language thing, but he writes, and he's another big influence for me, about a way of thinking that strives for rigor without forfeiting our animal kinship with the world around us, to think in accordance with the senses, to ponder and reflect without severing our sensorial bond with the owls and the wind. So this quote, and many others of Abram's, inspire me on this question about ritual. So what would be forms of ritual that do not forfeit our animal kinship with the world around us, that pray or reflect or whatever the gestures and actions are in accordance with the senses, ponder and reflect without severing our sensorial bond with the owls and the wind. So the presupposition, therefore, is that ritual worth doing invites us into reality, as opposed to cutting us off from reality. Ritual worth doing connects us to this whole vast reality from which we've become so alienated religiously, but also personally, societally, cognitively, emotionally, in so many ways. So how can ritual re-knit these connections, invite us into reality? So here's the, just walking through big glimpses of what kinds of rituals there are that humans have created. So people create ritual, and I've got this attribution to Doug Van Houten appears only on this slide of this work of his here. He's awesome, and he's also a wilderness guide and creates artwork that visually invites into these kinds of reconnections, spiritual, cognitive, imaginal, physical, sensorial reconnections with the natural world. So people create ritual to honor the sacred as they perceive it, right? That's a big reason for doing ritual. To consult or commune with God, whatever that might be for you, or God, spirits, ancestors, place, wind, seasons, deep self, imagination, dreams. To orient to reality, the ritual reminds us where we are, right? What's the cosmology that actually is true? Kinship, with whom am I related? Ethics, what does all this mean, right? Rituals name these and image these and invite us into them in a ceremonial way. They affirm and strengthen relationships, a sense of belonging to a particular us. And by this, I mean, first, primarily kind of a human circle, a family. So families have rituals, right? Families have table rituals or bedtime rituals for children. Holiday rituals, and they create this sense that we belong together. We are connected, and we ritualize that every day at meals, or every night as in going to bed, or every Thanksgiving, or whatever the patterns are. So they create a sense of kinship and belonging. They also affirm and strengthen relationships, this sense of belonging to a more than human kinship. And that might be, for some people, the sense of God or the divine or spirits. It might be all these kin with whom we're in relationship in our place. All kinds of layers of more than human connection that rituals can create. Or can demonstrate that we're not connected to, as I was saying before, with church walls and symbols and practices that are meant only for humans, and in which only human language and human references are used, and in which the divine is imaged as a human and all that kind of stuff. So rituals can also, right, create this sense of what the more than human kinship is, the divine that is not connected to the natural world symbolically, religiously, at least not named as such or honored. So people create ritual to align with core stories and myths. They tell stories from their sacred books. They tell stories from their oral tradition. They tell bedtime stories to children over and over and over. They tell fairy tales. They tell family stories. They tell all kinds of, right? So origin stories, myths of all kinds. And then a big one, people create ritual to negotiate transitions. So that might be ordinary transitions, like night falling, day breaking, dawn and dusk. Rituals are very common in human societies. Seasons changing, equinoxes and solstices. The ordinary transitions are of wellspring in traditional societies, and in our way too, right? What's your morning ritual? What's your bedtime? I mentioned bedtime rituals already for children, but we have them still as adults. Extraordinary transitions, when a disaster happens, or maybe an eclipse or a drought, or things that are not part of the regular practice, there are often rituals. Again, not only in traditional societies, we still gather in times of catastrophe and want to do things, right? Light candles, or have people lead reflections, or in various ways. So an important piece of ritual. And then life transitions, this huge dimension for all of us. So when a child is born, what do we do? How do we welcome them? How do we name them and honor them? When someone dies, same thing. Some people think that religion, or that language, or that symbol, or that art originated out of the experience of death and early humans wanting to do something, and that the experience of death and the need to ritualize is what gave birth to our human capacities in these ways. Puberty, how does that transition get negotiated? Marriage, an example even today of how a ritual is thought to actually enact something. So two people come into the wedding as separate people, they leave married. Something legally has happened, something performative has happened. So life rituals are meant to help usher actual transitions into place. So the child actually becomes an adult through moving through an adolescent rite of passage, when it works. So illness or injury and recovery, sickness and injury, and what should be done with that ritually. Taking on of new roles, moving into elderhood, how is that celebrated and welcomed and honored? An example of many of these that we don't do well in our society. Final life transition category, communal transitions. I should have maybe named the previous one personal or family. This one, communal transitions, having to do with a change of leadership, conflict and reconciliation between groups or societies, war and peacemaking on a bigger scale, or handling events or actions that are experienced as evil or threatening. Rituals help manage and negotiate those transitions. And finally, dream or spirit-led change, a sense of stirring and opening, or I've had a powerful dream or a sense of vision, and a ritual can help to step into that, or to enact that vision personally or communally. So those are big areas that ritual encompasses in human societies of all times and places. That we know of. But today, as many have noted, we've lost a lot of those. We've lost a lot of religious practices and communities, and people increasingly not participating or not finding convincing the communal ways of making meaning, the religious ways of making meaning that had nourished ancestors, but there's sort of nothing to take their place. And our loss of many layers of ritual, of all of those noted plus many others, right, compared with pre-modern societies, has coincided with this traumatic disenchantment of the world, this conversion of what had been an enchanted, alive, magical, spirited, animate world into dead matter, commodification, extractive capitalism. And religion somehow over here in some other realm, right? That in those earlier slides of religion disconnected from all of that. It's about heaven, or it's about the soul alone, like as if that's a kind of an individual psychic thing inside me, disconnected from the world, and the world itself is dead or polluted, or there's the holy realm and there's the unholy realm, all that kind of stuff. So the disenchantment of the world and the loss of ritual have gone together. Along with an increasing lack of elders as a result, capable of initiating young humans into what would it even mean to experience a mature, divine, permeated religious relationship with the living world. So few people today know what that means or feels like. We've lost that, and very few have, and we have few able to help initiate us. So we need a re-enchanted world, a religious, so the word religion, ligio, Latin, like ligament, right, is meant to connect. It's a connection. So religion is meant to be a reconnection, not a dualism, not a splitting, a reconnection. We need a religious community, a ritual deepened reconnection of psyche and earth, rewilding ritual. So we're going to move into some solo writing to give you time to reflect on how you have experienced some of these questions in relation to your own ritual life. And then we'll talk. So on a piece of paper or in a new browser window, not yet in the chat. So just do this on your own first, and then we'll put it into the chat and talk. So list, first just, I invite you to list powerful or meaningful ritual experiences of your life. Just in a list. As many as you can think of. Continuing with that, if needed, also beginning to reflect on what characterizes ritual as powerful or meaningful for you. What does that mean? What rituals do you think we most need today? What rituals do you think you or we need to stop doing? And what, for you, what would truly rewilding ritual mean? And you can hear that as, what would it mean to rewild rituals? Maybe ones that are important to you, or new ones that you want to create. Or it could mean, what would ritual that rewilds us look like? Rewilding in the other sense, ritual that rewilds its participants. What would that mean? I'm going to stop sharing. And maybe it's possible to change the way the screen is set up so that we can see each other. Is that possible?
Well, we won't be able to see the attendees because it's just
Okay.
panelists.
Oh,
I
okay.
can
Got
put
it.
in the chat. And well,
Yeah.
maybe if people were to or put into question and answers what they had written down.
Yeah.
I had a
Well,
question.
put into question and answer first if you want the introduction piece, because then I can see it now. About where you are and any of your questions, although maybe, you know, some of that is answered. And I was gonna say, if I could see everyone, I forgot we're in webinar mode, that I was realizing on the question of what rituals we should stop doing. I have a pet peeve about lawn noise, and the next door neighbor was leaf blowing in the hour before this webinar began and into the first few minutes, maybe 15 minutes of my time with you, which meant that, like, I've got this, it was hard to relax and come in with the sort of contemplative presence I wish for. And I completely forgot that I had intended to begin with some silence and breathing together and just sort of arriving in our place and you know, experiencing our roots going down through our feet into this earth where you live, and what it and who's here around you, and your senses opening, and that sort of arrival is how I'd intended to begin. And I completely forgot because I was in this space of trying to defend against the lawn noise, which is its own ritual, right? We have this idea of using leaf blowers for hours to clear the leaves from lawns. So anyway, a little ironic note there.
At least could you, I had a question, and maybe this might seem less obvious. You did express it in terms of our culture and various things of being meshed. Like, you know, me growing up, as a quick example, me growing up being Polish and Prussian, my relatives did not want to talk about the old country. The only thing that maybe survived was for my pierogies from my Polish side happening in December around Christmas, because that's when they did it. So that became a ritual. But what would you say to someone who says, well, what do you mean a ritual? I don't know that I've been in any rituals. How do I, what do you mean create a ritual? Do I go to Google and Google says, okay, well, first sit down and light 3 candles and then do, you know, so the most basic, because I think we've lost touch from the last workshop we did. It was like saying to someone, do you do art? What is art? Because they never did art.
Yeah.
So if you were to, what does it mean? Is to you, is a ritual just the fact that I do it once a month? Why do I create a ritual? You mentioned, oh, okay, I read a story at night. Is that a ritual? And how does that creating a ritual of reading once a night relate to me being back in contact with nature? And if you, just any of your thoughts about any of, you know, the idea of someone says, well, I don't even know what a ritual is. What do you mean?
Right. Yeah, I ran across a website that said, should Christians have ritual, or something like that? Maybe from a context where they think having too much liturgy or something is a problem. So it was framed in the negative. Should Christians have ritual? No, you know, which is kind of hilarious in that as humans, everything we do is in some way everything we do is symbolic, in that it moves through language, and or not, maybe not everything, but a vast amount of what we do is symbolic, because language is symbolic. The word dog is not the actual dog. It's a agreed upon form by which we denote a dog. So similarly with ritual, it's, you know, the examples are so numerous. So I use the example of bedtime rituals, which is something that parents and children create together. No, they don't have to Google how to do this, although they might learn from friends or relatives or what their parents did with them as a child. But often it's created between parent and child, in terms of what happens at bath time, and what happens in moving into bed, and what stories are told and or read, and how is that kind of enacted, and are there prayers, or are there, gratitude, or some other kind of thing that is developed. And if some piece of that doesn't happen, the child notices and points that out. And similarly with all kinds of other aspects of our lives, we learn from early on, how to behave in society based on certain ritualized forms. Sports is a classic example of ritual that's highly formalized and highly popular, and is a great way to sort of help students and others see how ritual works. So like when I was teaching at that seminary, it was in Columbus, Ohio, and the Buckeyes are the de facto religion of Columbus, Ohio, and the whole state, as far as I could tell.
Right.
And there's holy space. There's the shoe. Is that the name of that stadium? The stadium for the Buckeyes is classic and it's beloved. And there are rituals of how the teams come in and what music is played and what happens next. And the fans know the rituals, right? And there's special clothing. You wear certain clothing and you wear certain colors, and you don't wear the colors of the opposing team. And there's all that kind of stuff, right? Hats and gear.
Well,
and
that's a good definition.
That's
a good definition. It helps you see. I mean, part of what you were just, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I just wanted to say that the first parts of what you were talking about was me even being aware as a person, what am I doing with my loved ones in my daily life? Are we eating dinner always together? Are we, like you said, are we having a bedtime thing, or am I just telling you to go to your room and go to sleep? Or what is it that goes on to be conscious about those times together over the bigger societal things of, okay, every Sunday we're going to be eating this food and watching the game.
Right.
And that's being dictated to us, saying this is what you should do at this time. I mean, I remember one time thinking that I was going to fast during Thanksgiving, and everybody thought I had lost my mind.
Totally countercultural.
Yeah, right. But I just want to pose, because I think it gets lost of realizing that, you mentioned about starting out with the meditation. I think that goes along with what you were talking about. Do we consciously think about how we interact with the people we interact with each day? And do we see some of those things that we do over and over again as an important ritual? I mean, I could say I have a ritual with my cat. When I wake up in the morning, my cat is there waiting for me to make sure that I pet it. And it lets me know if I don't do that morning petting, right? So how do we understand that and translate that into being that with the people that we're around?
Well, and it takes a lot of intentionality, because so many factors work against that kind of presence for families. The schedules are all over the place, and you have to drive people to this place and to that place, and we're never home at the same time, or we're too busy, nobody has time to cook, or right, there's a million factors that make it hard. So it takes a great deal of intentionality for a family to commit to dinner together, which used to be completely standard, or so we think, right, looking back. So what the things you're describing take intention, take time.
Well, also, I mean, a quick story on that. I was performing, and this one health director said to us, I don't know how the students, 8th graders, are going to relate to you. And we said, well, why? And they said, well, they don't trust adults. And I said, okay. And they said, that's normal for a certain age. And she said, no, this is different, because I went through and I asked them one day, how many of them ate with their parents this week? No hands went up. How many people ate in 2 weeks? No hands. A couple of months. It turned out that all the students had credit at the local mall for the food court there. So they ate alone, came home, went to their room. Their parents came back from their jobs. Maybe you're having cocktails in the living room or just being in there. The only interaction they had is when they came out of their room, their parents saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, or why are you doing that? So there was no time of hanging out without criticism, without talking about anything about. So she said, when I go to see some of the movies that I think they may go look at, so I could have a conversation with them, when I ask them about that movie, they think I'm prying or trying to get them into trouble. so I think what's important for what you just said is it is a major effort to figure out how to change that.
Yes.
But the benefits you may not even realize is that you will have a really much better relationship with your family members or your child. It's almost take a look at what is your relationship? Is that the only relationship you have? Is that the ritual you have? Every time you see them, you're telling them what not to do.
Exactly. That's why I tried to include examples of rituals we might want to not do, because ritual is formative and often unconscious. So the things that we might not name as ritual, or that we might just consider rote, that are a little pre-conscious, can be the most formative things of all. So to become conscious of that, yeah, what are the actual rituals of my interaction with my teenager is super important.
There was one person who answered the question and answer, and they said they were from East Hartford, Connecticut, and that they're interested in nature and community. Somebody else said that the chat was disabled. I could allow people to talk. Here, let me just, actually, I can go through and put on chat for them. So let me see if that will help them, because they were saying that they weren't being able to chat. And if someone wants to raise their hand in attendance and I let them speak, then they can ask your question.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is intended to open up. Yeah.
Yes,
And
yeah,
just
that's what I'm trying to do for you here.
Yeah. Thank you. And just to say that, as you're noting, Paul, how difficult this can be just on the family level, how much harder in terms of time and intention to help to imagine stretching ourselves out even farther beyond if we can't even do it with our children many times, because people are so busy and financial pressures are so strong, or our screens are so seductive, or whatever the reason is, we're so tired. How much harder
we're so divided.
That too. How much harder to stretch in the ways I'm suggesting we need to actually begin to reknit connections beyond the human circle. So you're helping show that yeah, we're in this very divided, alienated, disconnected way of being human that's not working well. It's not working well for children, for adults, for elders, for the earth, for society, on any number of levels. Like, it's pretty catastrophic. And you're giving us a microcosm of what that looks like.
So here's I don't know if it's a philosophical question. Your premise is that I would be strong enough or understand that I have the ability to create things. So if I'm missing something in my life, that I would be conscious about thinking about how can I not have that missing in my life.
Right. Well, I'm proposing exactly. That's right.
That's a pretty big assumption for a world where people don't trust their own feelings and think they need to be told. They need to be told what to do.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts about how to have people realize that they won't be making a mistake in them attempting to try to figure out which ritual works for them?
Yeah. Well, you just said it. That's right. So that's what I'm doing. Proposing that the creation of ritual, that the taking seriously of ritual, that play with ritual is worth doing, and that we need together to be having these conversations. So
what other word would you use besides ritual?
Practice. People often use language of spiritual practice. Yeah, there's others.
No, because this maybe sometimes when people hear ritual, they right away think of the folks in the woods with sacrifice, the Friday night horror movie versions of the rituals. I mean, our culture has really stolen a lot of words and turned them into something that we're, like you said, the whole idea of Native American, the whole things of different periods of your life had a sense of you are transitioning.
Right.
You are here now. Oh, women moving into having their periods. We're here now. We're acknowledging this. We've lost many of that. And how many times I have a partner as a nurse where people said their mother, nobody talked to them about it. All of a sudden they're bleeding at school and wondering what happened to them. Right. And you realize, wow, that simple thing was not conveyed. And so again, it's left to us. I mean, that you're trying to figure out how to bring that back into society.
And and to invite people to take seriously our own capacity to start making those reconnections. That's right. But again, using examples of parents and children, and maybe it's because babies and toddlers need a lot of time and attention, that's where I think people often have a sense of what it means to create a ritual, because you do that just intuitively with your child.
I have one person who has their hand up here, so let me bring them in.
Good. A place to begin that's non-threatening and creative and playful.
Okay, Lee, can you unmute and have a question?
I believe I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I found this actually fascinating, but the area you haven't touched on is the ritual to focus, the ritual to affect change, the rituals that we use to, whether it's prayer, whether it's magic, whether it's an athlete sort of preparing themselves, the ones where we try to focus our mind, our concentration to affect some change, whether it's within us or whether it's out into the world generally. And I just wondered if you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah. The closest I named, besides kind of the performative, thing of marriage, where something actually is happening, right, is that even today we see that, we experience that, and lots of different rituals in past cultures would have had the same effect. The closest I came, besides that kind of performative layer, was at the very end of the section on different kinds of rituals, talking about dreams or areas of wanting to grow into or step into. But you're right, those two it doesn't have to be big kind of dramatic changes like that might imply, but right, how do I prepare to step into, doing my best on the tennis court or whatever the situation is. So those are examples of similar kinds of
and obviously in a lot of non-Christian culture,
yes,
those kind of rituals, which are basically about curing somebody, making
possibly, yes,
are incorporated into the consciousness of the tribe, and we seem to have completely forgotten that. The idea of although there are still remnants of prayers for specific things that, as a good Catholic boy, I go to church, but that it's no longer deeply ingrained,
right?
But there is a ritual that if we go through, and if enough of us go through, we can actually make the world a better place. We can actually change something.
Yeah, we don't have a shared cosmology about that. Like, even like you say, as a Catholic boy growing up, you were taught, that prayer, if you pray and God answers your prayer, then this thing will happen, or a saint will answer your prayer, or Mary or somebody, and there will be some specific thing that takes place because you prayed, you made that happen in effect. Once someone leaves that cosmology, we don't have an alternative. We don't have any way to conceive of what might it mean to sort of collectively or personally, like the scientific worldview doesn't allow for that. So,
well, as you mentioned, we basically
although quantum might, maybe working more with quantum understandings of how particles and creatures therefore are interconnected could help generate forms of ritual.
One of the things is that there was a parallel, the substance and the shadow, one, and that if the mind does something, the body follows. The body does something, the mind follows. This idea that there is an interconnectedness, which is science, and that we somehow have lost that idea that there's a link with us. That if we actually do things, if we want something badly enough, if we will it, if we perform it, if we get back to, as you say, get in touch with the earth ourselves again, that we can actually, I don't think that is in a way goes against sort of quantum mechanics and the way physics is going.
Yeah, we don't know, I think. Like, because we don't have a shared cosmology, like some people still are operating with a traditional religious sense that, God is going to answer my prayer or not answer my prayer, and others, the scientific worldview means there's no God, but they don't have an alternative. Others yet with this emerging quantum sense of like, what does that actually mean as a cosmology? Or what does that mean in terms of how we think about our will and our intention and effects of that. Like, we don't know yet, I think, what kinds of collective consciousness can emerge. I think that's still emerging.
Well, unfortunately, we have it now. Unfortunately, we have it now with war is peace. It's almost like that seems to be the major I mean, putting it out there as if we don't think dialogue works, or we don't. I mean, you know, you brought out there isn't what's being offered to us as sports, and what's being offered to us as various other things that's saying these are the rituals we need to take part in. But as far as a group ritual of working on the environment, or I mean, you know, think about it, that when they were there, the natives were in the doing the whole thing with trying to save the rivers with the pipeline, they were called terrorists. I mean, it's kind of like, wait a minute, people are asking to save the water, or not take chances with polluting the water. Why aren't we having this discussion?
Yes.
And you know, if we went to the ancient, we would be part of the water, so there wouldn't be a conflict.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in a way, it would seem to me that if we are going to sort of do things like save the planet, but actually get some, we have to actually know what to connect to, and we have to connect to it.
Yes.
And that is the sort of global ritual. That is the sort of universal rituals that we had at one point.
Yes. And we still have connection to this earth and its creatures and each place, and yet we're not connecting religiously there either. So that's where it begins, I think, is learning to be in relationship with the creatures of one's place, to love them, to over time get to know them.
We have a World Wide Web, but not a kind of spiritual web.
Yeah, right. And as I was just thinking about these questions just now, you know, this sense of conscious shared cosmology, or to what extent can our collective desires and will create something new? People are much more talking about now, you know, artificial intelligence, and that's going to sort of take over, right? There's fears about that. And so far, even it's sort of like when COVID happened, and we hoped for 5 minutes that it might lead us outdoors again, and then it ended up even more indoors. Now, you know, these worries about artificial intelligence and what it might do, taking us even further again away from the actual literal physical and spiritual connection to the creatures of our place, and this urgent need for ecological reconnection. And yet we seem to be moving farther and farther from that. So children not even being taught native species anymore in biology class and all that kind of stuff. So how do we reverse some of that, reconnect?
I think you wanting to start with a meditation. I mean, when you think about AI, again, it's all, or I joked about Google. I'm asking Google, I'm not asking myself.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about, do you trust what you experience when you try to ask yourself these questions?
Yeah.
Can you say, yes, I'm okay with that? I believe that, or do I need an authority to tell me that what I felt is right?
Yes. And does it even matter, the natural world? Like, we don't even notice. So this idea of reconnecting religiously is so far from many people's sort of sense of religious radar, of spiritual radar. So again, it's about conversations, about sort of modeling, about inviting people in new ways. But it's countercultural, like fasting on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
I mean, this is one step.
Yes.
And each person who's watching this maybe will make their own step.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And where is it for you? And where is the creativity beckoning? Yeah, that's right.
So we're down to about the last 5 minutes. Thank you so much, Lee, for coming in and asking this question. Lisa, do you want to kind of wrap up or conclude or make any last statements that you were thinking about from everything we've been talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, well, just to say, the conversation has been illuminating precisely in this sense of how far from the sort of living connections to Earth of traditional societies and of many people still today. Most of us are like that. It feels unthinkable or a little crazy, is instructive, and so so my own work in religion here at HIU has to do with students from all different religious backgrounds or no religious background, with having opportunities together to think about these questions and to create ritual together, or to invite students into these into readings and into practices that re-knit the connections week by week and semester by semester, so that it becomes not crazy, and leading community prayer outdoors with the HIU community, or every opportunity there is to make thinkable, and to give people tangible experiences of ritual and spiritual practice that does connect us physically and emotionally and spiritually to the life of the world, this beleaguered, beautiful world that needs our spiritual connection. So the invitation is just to start.
Great, thank you. In terms of anything else, much appreciated in terms of you presenting here and bringing up all those questions. I hope people will think about that, and we need it very much as far as people coming together. And I noticed that even a simple ritual I started many, many years ago was to be grateful when I went to bed.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when I talked to someone about that. They were like, yeah, but this is going on, and then, yeah, I can have a long list of all the stuff that I could say, why did that happen, and blah, 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 all that. But on another level, I'm here.
Yeah.
I want to express gratefulness.
Amen. And you could expand that. You could expand that to also to say, where and when was I consciously present to the natural world today? As
That's
just
right.
a place to begin.
That's right. And I think something that you mentioned and maybe people don't realize is by doing that ritual for so long now, it's definitely affected me in my overall attitude of being grateful.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting aspect to realize when you were mentioning, because, if someone doesn't do something, they might say, oh, really? Is that going to really be the effect? It's like, well, you won't know until you say once a week, I'm going to take a walk in the park and just look at what's going on, or try to go more, not just to a manicured park,
Exactly.
to where there's some woods, and really
Exactly.
not be scared about being off the trail a little bit, or
That's right.
I'm going to get attacked by some animals, or or address your fears when you're there, like, is nature that scary?
Yes. And then where is is there a sense of the sacred in all of this, even if it's scary, and to start making these religious connections to the life of the world that we've lost. So step by step, as you're describing, where is the holy?
Yes.
Whatever that might be.
That's right. That's right. Well, and I think, thank you for expressing it in terms of being that open, because unfortunately we get too many times, as you mentioned with the football ritual, you are holy by wearing the yellow shirt, otherwise you're out of sync.
Right.
And so there isn't, I'm sure you're not sending people to your website to get your holy shirt that is going to give them the right ritual. And I think people are uncomfortable with that, not knowing of what it is, the trusting that it's okay for them to do whatever they will do.
And that the natural world itself will teach us it's the trees are the elders, the animals, the winds, the storms. The storms have a lot to say to us right now, right? So the world itself is the teacher. You don't have to know, just go listen and learn. That's maybe the takeaway.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.